Um, I'm back. Our family's back. We all made it. We had a really incredible, amazing trip. This was a trip we were supposed to take in summer of 2020 to Europe. But alas, like many things, it got postponed for a few years. But our oldest, Ren, was able to join us. So it was all five Bernholzes on a European tour, 4 countries, 5 days, lots of cities. And as we were walking in, Nathaniel and I were like, wait, where were we on Friday? Were we in Bruges? Were we in Strasbourg? Wait, were we in Heidelberg? We don't even know what day we were in what city, but we sure had a lot of fun. And yes, baguettes in Paris are that good. So I come before you tonight because I want to talk both about story, but also about place. A lot of us have those stories of our grandparents and of our parents, and they tell you about places, right? They tell you about their adventures and the places they've been, and you just hear the stories again and again. And that's what I certainly experienced growing up, that I have my Oma and Opa. My Opa was from Germany. He lived in Oberhausen, and that's part of the reason I have the map up. Oberhausen is up right over here near Essen and Dortmund and Dusseldorf. And so here's Oberhausen, and I was like, oh, I can see Oberhausen on the map, right? I had known he in Oberhausen. I had heard adventures that he had down further south in Paris. But what we had always heard about my grandfather is that in 1938, sometime really close to Kristallnacht, the Nazi secret police are coming for him, and he buys a train ticket further into Germany and climbs under the train car going the opposite direction, smuggles himself to Switzerland, meets my grandmother, and uses her Swiss passport to go to Panama before they eventually find their way into Dallas, Texas. Once they arrive a few years later, he's given a choice, my grandfather, to either go into the U.S. Army or to go into a camp for German nationals. He goes in the U.S. Army. We've actually seen his secret agent card. He was in military intelligence, and we have a card that says, this is Hans Samuel Bernholz. Wherever he wants to go, whatever he wants to do, he has permission from the U.S. Army in 5 languages. It's really kind of cool. Just saw that a couple of years ago, but we were told, like, fought in the Battle of the Bulge and military intelligence and all of these things. Those are the stories that I've always heard from childhood. And you also have to realize that my grandfather was 5 foot tall. Okay, Nathaniel, can you stand up for just a moment? That's where we got the height. Thank you. I'm sorry, Nathaniel, to do that to you. Yeah. So those are the stories I've been told. And there is a story from the Hasidic world about the Baal Shem Tov, that it is told that there was a plague in the time of the Baal Shem Tov, and he goes out into the woods to a special place, and he lights a special fire, and he does a special dance, and he sings a special song, and the plague is abated. You might have heard me tell this story. It's such a beautiful story, right? Because the next generation, the next rabbi in the next generation, and there's a problem, and he knows the place, and he knows how to light the fire, and he knows how to do the dance, but he doesn't remember the song. And then the third generation, he knows the place and the fire, but he doesn't know the dance, and he doesn't know the song. And then the next generation, he doesn't know how to light the fire, but he does know the place. And in the final generation, the final cycle, what is the punchline? All he knows is the story. And I've always told that because, first of all, I love stories, but also because stories are so powerful to put us in through our imagination into all of these places and spaces, and to honor and remember our ancestors. And so imagine I have all of these stories, and then suddenly last week, I found myself in the places. And I don't think I realized how powerful and incredible it would be, and how much I would really find myself in the places where my grandparents were, especially my Opa. So I said that he was from Oberhausen, that he lived in Oberhausen. and we found ourselves changing trains in Cologne. And so there we were coming back up. We had been in Heidelberg where Jill had spent some time. We're coming back up towards Northern Europe. We find ourselves in Cologne, and I realize I'm driving right past, just a short way from the Oberhausen area, waving to my great-grandmother, who I'll show you a picture of in just a few minutes as we come by. And then we came across, and we eventually found ourselves changing trains in Brussels. Changing trains was a theme of the trip. We changed a lot of trains as we used Eurorail to go over. If anybody wants to travel Europe and the inside scoop on Eurorail, just talk to the Bernholz family. And we eventually found our way over, I think it's over here on the map, and found our way to eventually to Bruges, where we had a lovely couple of days. And as we're going, I'm stopping each night and I'm relaying to my father, we've made it to Strasbourg, we've made it to Heidelberg, we've made it to Bruges. And my dad says, oh, Strasbourg. Yeah, I think we had relatives in Strasbourg. Your grandfather used to go all the time. And I'm like, wait, what? Stories I had never heard, but because what happened? I found myself in that place. Suddenly I'm getting more of the story. And then a few days ago, after we returned, my parents came to visit, and as we're sharing the stories of all of our adventures, my dad starts sharing more with us that my grandfather had actually spent time in Brussels, where we had driven through the different train stations, spent a little bit of time in Brussels, that he had been in Antwerp, and well, maybe he had been in Bruges, and then eventually found his way into Paris before returning to go and take care of my great-grandmother. So Nathaniel, you can actually pull the map down and go back to the PowerPoint. This is actually my great-grandmother. And this is my great-grandparents. My middle name is Zachary. I was named after Zacharias. And this is their headstone that we would have seen if we had made it all the way to Oberhausen. And then this is my grandparents. So this is my opa on the left and my oma on the right. And I absolutely love this picture because if you'll notice something, my grandfather is standing up straight and wearing a hat. Do you all notice the hat? My grandmother is hunched down and she's still taller than him. Just saying, I saw that picture and was like, he really was only 5 foot tall. There he is in his U.S. Army uniform, either before or after he had gone to Europe. I share that with you and that idea of place and that idea of story because as I was going back and forth across all of these places, I was felt more and more connected to the stories that I had been told since childhood. Here are these spaces. It dawned on me, he fought in the Battle of the Bulge. The Battle of the Bulge is just over in the over the border in Netherlands and Belgium, right across from Oberhausen. I hadn't ever dawned on me, why would he volunteer for that duty? Because he wanted to go home. Here I am crossing these spaces. My grandfather, who died, I was 8 years old when my grandfather died, and I was finding myself in these places and spaces connected to him. And wouldn't you know that that is this week's Torah portion? This week's Torah portion is Jacob. In vaychi, Jacob, finally an old man, has finally been reunited with Joseph. Joseph, of course, was taken away a number of Torah portions ago, Parshiot ago, taken away into slavery. Jacob is told that Joseph has been killed. And then the brothers come down and you have all of the hijinks that happens in the last few weeks. But eventually Joseph reveals himself to the brothers and the brothers say, make peace. And they eventually bring Jacob, and there is Jacob. And who does Jacob see in this week's Torah portion right at the beginning? But his grandsons, Ephraim and Manasseh. There's whole midrash about Ephraim and Manasseh and why does he offer the blessing. There's a famous Shabbat blessing. When you bless your sons, on Shabbat, you're actually supposed to cross your hands over because that's what Jacob does. He crosses his hands over to bless his grandsons. And there's why does he do that? And why are we doing this special blessing for our children? to be like Ephraim and Manasseh. Your daughters, you're supposed to say, may you be like Rebecca and Sarah. And there's all kinds of midrash and commentary about why they get those kinds of blessings. But here we have this moment in our Torah portion where you have this incredible blessing of not parent to child, but grandfather to grandchild. And there I am feeling myself crisscrossing all of these places. And it wasn't that my Opa was there putting his hands on me, but every time I was in those cities, every time I looked out and saw one of those railroad crossings, every time I kept getting a story from my dad, I felt my grandfather's presence with me. And I just felt that blessing. I felt that moment. I felt that incredible connection. And there's this beautiful, beautiful teaching about this Torah portion that Jacob's right at the end of his life, and he's looking at these two grandchildren, Ephraim and Manasseh, not sure what to make of them. And in fact, Ephraim and Manasseh, there is a teaching that their names have to do with living in diaspora. And remember that their mother is actually Egyptian. And so he's not sure what's going to happen as it gets passed generation to generation. And there is a beautiful, incredible commentary, midrash teaching that Shema is uttered in this moment. So in this moment, you have Jacob and Joseph and all of Jacob's children, and now his grandchildren are standing there. Jacob is about on his last breath. And think about the language of Shema Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. We translate it all the time. Listen, Israel, Adonai is your God, Adonai is one, is our God, Adonai is one. But what happens instead of Israel, all of us, it changes into the person Israel, who is Jacob. And the commentary, the Midrash, is very powerful, and it says that was Jacob's children and grandchildren in this moment saying, Shema Yisrael. Listen, Dad. Listen, Grandpa. Adonai is our God. Adonai is one. Don't worry. We've listened, we've heard, we've taken the stories to heart. We are connected with them. We are carrying them door to door, generation to generation. We're going to pass it on to our children and grandchildren. Listen, Shema. Listen, Dad. Listen, Grandpa. Don't worry. You've cast it to us and we've got it. And then Jacob replies, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. As I hear you all reassure me that my legacy will pass on, I know that God's presence, that weight, that honor will then now carry Leolam Va'ed forever and ever. As I think about that trip, as I think about this Torah portion, as I think about that way that we have those opportunities to tell stories, that we have those opportunities like Jacob to lay, and I say lay hands, right? Because that's what he does. He is laying hands on his grandsons, but we can change it, right? Maybe it's offering blessing, maybe it's offering hug, maybe it's offering a smile. We have those opportunities, like I experienced last week, whether it's visiting the place, whether it's lighting a special fire, whether it's singing a special song, whether it's just telling a story, we have those opportunities to make those connections across time and space, to bring light and love of the past generations into our world, to make it sure that we pass that light and love, not just from generation to generation, but all around us. As I say, Amen. And it's good to be back.